Checking. We are recording now. Okay. Hello, it has been a long time, Hats and Cats viewers. Long time. I'm back from a break. I'm still kind of sick. Hopefully, the coughing will be kept to a minimum. But here today, I got some Asia admins. Pretty excited to get them some more coverage, go over some social issues of the scene. Today, we'll be going over it with Fish and Fade from Asia
Hi guys.
UGC. Go ahead and introduce yourselves for a little bit.
Okay, I guess I'll go first. So,
Yeah.
hi guys, my name is Fish. I am a player and admin of the UGC Asia, also known as ATF2L, and I work there as a PR manager as well as Platinum Highlander moderate administrator. So every single dispute goes through me alongside my friends Fade and Spud. And now I play RGL. So I'm kind of like I'm like both worlds too. I'm both NA and Asia. How about you, Fade?
Yep. Hi, I'm Fade. I've been playing competitive Highlander since the Dunning-Kruger effect days, and I am currently an ATF12 admin since the third season. So ATF12 existed for about a year, and then I became an admin after a year. So right now I'm sort of the soft head admin for Highlander at least, so I am mostly in charge of the decision making behind the Highlander changes.
All right. And
Yeah.
what brings you on board today? What kind of was your motivation?
Alright, so maybe without further ado, let's start with the interview.
Sure. Yeah.
So maybe like personally you wanna ask the first question? Then let's
Yeah. So the first one Fish wanted to kind of delve into is kind of like what makes ATF12 different from North America. From other regions. What kind of makes it unique? What are the issues it faces? And then what are the kind of like
Blitz, you're muted.
fuck? I was muted in Discord. Okay. We're still a little bit rusty. Okay. So I wanted to go over. Let me see here. The sort of differences between ATF12 and North American Team Fortress 2, kind of like what makes it unique culturally wise, gameplay wise, what sets it apart, and what issues it might face as a region.
Would you like to start, Fade?
Yeah, I don't have much experience of the player culture mentality in North America, but generally in Asia, I would say more so for Highlander, the players are generally not as motivated to want to improve at the game. For example, watching casted matches and going for demo reviews are quite foreign. Usually, they're only restricted to the top teams in each division, and yeah, generally, there's a lack of motivation for people to improve. People still do play pugs and scrims and whatever, but generally, they're not as motivated to want to improve their game or as a team. Like usually there's scrims and whatnot, but like teams usually don't talk about like what strategies they're gonna do. They just like play. So I'm not sure how that differs in NA. I'm quite sure that not everyone is very willing to improve, but definitely there will be some that are. It's just in Asia it's way too little. For example, even the top team in Asia, Ambulas, which is currently the team that I'm leading, we're basically just winning off mechanical advantages alone. So like there isn't really a need to scrim and improve. I think we went through the entirety of the most recent season. We went 12-0, and I don't think we had a single scrim. So there is really no motivation for us as a team at least to want to improve, especially at Highlander. I think more so as a broad perspective of the players in Asia, their mindsets are generally more mechanically oriented. So perhaps they see very little value of teamwork and watching demo reviews, making smarter plays in general, because Asia is, in my opinion, quite a mechanically oriented region where they think
Yeah.
that good mechanics would help them win. I mean, no doubt about that. But when they think that good mechanics alone are enough to win, I think that's where it becomes problematic because they see any loss as something they couldn't control because the team we're fighting just has better DM. There's nothing we can do. It's there and done. Nothing. Nothing we can do as a team. Nothing you can do individually because your level of mechanics is already at a certain level. So that's why I think the state of the region in terms of skill tends to stagnate. And that could be one of the key problems in Asia. Like, what do you think, Fish?
I really agree regarding the nature of players here. The nature of players relying on mechanical skill because in my opinion like having played in NA and Asia is a lot more oriented towards mechanical ability because a lot of like something that I noticed, right, is that in NA there's a plethora of scrims because there's so many teams to have scrims on. Like I remember playing like an NC team once, like playing with an NC team once in HL, and they had a scrim blacklist. So they have like the ability to blacklist like different teams because there's so many teams to scrim with. So they can choose who they don't want to scrim with. Here, the main difference is in Asia, there's like only like 4 teams that you can scrim with. And most likely, if they're in the same division, if you want to scrim from the same division, you're most likely not gonna get it because these teams don't want to scrim against you because they don't want to like leak anything or like show how good or better they are in the event of like an actual official. So in terms of like TF2 or like in terms of like getting better in Asia, we are very much starved in resources. Like in NA, we have like my team, for example, we have like seven scrims, seven scrims like before an official. Two on Fridays, two on Saturdays, two on Sundays, and then one pre-scrim. Like we even have a pre-scrim on Monday. Can you believe that, Fade? In Asia, Blizz, okay? In Asia, we only have one scrim. One.
And
Uh,
I think one is
okay.
like even on the more committed side. Many teams go around with
Yeah.
zero.
All right.
Yeah.
Do you
So
mind if I ask a few quick follow-up questions?
sure. Let me just finish this thought, okay?
Yeah,
So
sure thing, sure
just
thing.
yeah. So because of that, because there's like not a lot of like ways for the team to improve because there's no scrims, right? And a lot of players don't have the time to like actually get into mentorship sessions. We have to rely on mechanical ability because the only way we're going to improve as a team is through ourselves. So that's why in Asia, like if you go to Asia, right, like the Asia servers right now, their MGE servers are almost always populated. And every single time you would queue, like if you queue in casual, there will always be servers that's full of casual players, like not full of competitive players, because that's the only way we're gonna improve. We're not gonna be like we're barely going to improve in scrims or mixes, but we have to improve ourselves. So we start with ourselves more than we do as a team. So I think that's like the main difference of ATF2L in regards to RGO, which makes A2F very, very unique. What do you think, Bliss? Do you have any questions for that?
Uh, yeah, so that obviously leads to like a more individualized sort of gameplay, right? Like that's how you get a more DM focused sort of player orientation when it's just like the limited practice that you do get is all focused on just improving your own mechanics. Yes, that obviously hurts your ability to like strategize and coordinate as a team, especially combined with a lack of mentorship, yeah?
Yep.
Okay. So is this a sixes problem too? Fours, like what other formats you have, or is it kind of exclusive to Highlander in Asia?
Oh, I wish Spud was here because Spud is the sixes specialist. But
Fair.
you go first, Fade.
I've recently been playing sixes. I would say that it is still an issue, just not to as large of an extent. Because many times teams just have the mentality that they're gonna win and they're gonna lose based on the a team's strength as a sum of its players. Just individually, oh, we have better DM, we are gonna win. That kind of thing. So because of that, like teams in Asia also usually end up in Highlander at least, they're just like banning steal. They just want to like play either really straightforward payload maps or just cough maps, because that's generally how they like to think of competitive in general. Just a team strength as the sum of its parts. So I think back to your question, is this the issue in sixes also? I can't say for all divisions, but I would say that this is an issue, though to a smaller extent in sixes, where you can probably, maybe if you're a committed team, get 2 scrims a week. Maybe some players, like the more motivated ones, get mentorships, but that in itself just opens another can of worms. Because from my perspective in Highlander at least, not to throw shade on anyone, but essentially all the mentors are not anything that I would personally recommend to anyone.
Is that like
They-
gameplay or personality wise or both?
Oh, gameplay wise. Like usually, you don't have issues with people's personalities, but I think in terms of skill level, even quote unquote Asia Plat, I'm referring to Highlander. Asia Plat for Highlander is not exactly good. So it's very far from invite. It's barely even main. I'm quite sure the best Asia Highlander team, which is my team, if we had equal ping, we would probably still lose to an average main team and possibly even get rolled by an playoffs main team.
Well, that's
So
humble, I guess.
yeah, so I think we are very far in terms of skill level. Like mechanically, we're probably better than main. It's just that we just severely outclassed, especially in Highlander, where I think in general it's less mechanically intense than sixes. Although
Right.
generally the consensus is that in Asia, more people tend to focus on sixes. For example, if there's a player that plays both sixes and Highlander, they'll probably prioritize sixes over Highlander. Although the issues in Highlander are still somewhat present in sixes. But I mean, back to the topic of mentorship, for those more committed, I feel that it is to some extent blind men leading blind men, because I don't think the mentors are that knowledgeable in the game. It's the equivalent of RGL. You're getting someone from like IM to mentor an NC player. I don't think many of the things that said IM player would mentor and suggest would be healthy for the player's knowledge.
So, would you say that's like a bit of a bad thing to see that, or do you think it's kind of more nuanced than that? Like in like a North American sense, like lower div players mentoring other lower div players.
I think it's quite a bad thing, because generally when new players get mentorship, they might come under the impression that the player that's mentoring them, their mentor, is infallible, and they just take everything at face value. So that might become a danger, and because these habits will form very early. So let's say a new player gets told by a mentor, for example, that soldier exists only to bomb, for example, in Highlander. Like soldier exists only to bomb, and spy exists only to get map picks. That mentality might set in very early, and it might be hard to break as they progress.
So, what you're kind of saying essentially is that like lower div players, even if they have good intent when mentoring, might not necessarily understand the different ways to play the game, and might just get other players to like adopt how they play the game without thinking about it more, in a sense.
Yeah, and I think
Okay.
that's very dangerous to have, because it leads to player skill levels stagnating. And the worst part is the new players don't know how to benchmark the skill level of their mentor, because in Asia it's basically only 2 or 3 divs, and the highest div is platinum, and even top platinum is barely even main. And that being said, they might go on par with the average main team, but the reason they go on par is purely the mechanics alone. Like in terms of their Highlander knowledge, they're probably even comparable to IM or AM teams. And I don't think I'm exaggerating this. Like people in Asia, this is like the second best Highlander team, like the one where we fought for like grand finals. For example, on Upward they push from spiral stairs on Last, and that is probably like one of the worst places you can push from. Like, and that was like debunked long time ago, like even before the Dunning-Kruger effect days. Like people are doing very old pushes because they don't watch other regions. They probably deduced it themselves, and when these people mentor newer players, these newer players will not fully understand why the pushes are the way they are because the mentors probably do not have the knowledge to impart, i.e., they are teaching their mentees bad principles to begin with. I think that's very dangerous.
Okay. So what are potential solutions to that? Like, do you think you or like some of the players on your team, for instance, would still have a better understanding of the game, or would be good at mentoring? Or like, if not, like, have you thought about just getting more players from other regions involved in mentoring or anything like that?
Definitely the latter, because, for example, uh, even though I would think that my Highlander knowledge is better than most in Asia, I still don't think it is sufficient to call myself a full-blown mentor. So in recent times, I've opted more towards the latter when people like come to me to ask me for like advice or even mentorship directly. I've referred them to where they could find really good mentorship. And most of the times it is the RGL website or the ETF2L website. So I think very recently, like Sleepy, who's a new spy player, like came to me for advice, and then I told him that I can only give you like very general advice, but here's where you can find like really quality mentorship. And then I gave him like the ETF2L Discord because say, oh hey, this is a Prem spy. He's opened up his mentorship on the Looking for Mentors channel. Similarly, like some steel engineer asked me for like some engineer mentorship, and then I said that, oh, I don't know everything on every map, but here's the engineer.tf Discord. You can open up a thread and then ask for mentorship there. So that is mostly what I've been doing. I'm referring people to where they can get, in my opinion, far better mentorship.
Hmm.
Then that also like leads to another issue where if we get mentorship from other regions, what what other regions may what other region mentors might suggest might not actually be the most effective play in Asia. I'm using effective in the sense that you can do a very bad play, but it can yield very good results only because the enemy team doesn't punish it. I can't think of any play right now, but there are many plays which um, they might not be the most effective or efficient play, but they are the most ideal in the sense that you like intentionally don't do the maximum that your class can output, but you still do it anyways because that like minimizes the risk. I'm not sure how that like sounds, but basically it's like not overextending, that kind of things.
Right, that makes sense. Also, like, as a general rule of thumb, though, with any region, it's like you have 9 different players at the minimum on a team. You multiply that by 2 for the enemy team, and then that's like 18 potential differences on just like a class by class basis between regions. So even if it's good for like one region, it just might not be as viable for another because things might differ so much, even if it would be the correct thing on paper, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I just thought of an example. It's like, for example, Swiftwater Third. Like the hold on Swiftwater Third is morphed more so to be holding underneath the platform in the bunker. So like teams that receive mentorship, like maybe let's say an engineer receives mentorship from like I don't know, Exaflamer from engineer.tf, and then Exa might tell the engineer, okay, you can like build below, and then like the engineer takes it into his or her like game in Asia, and then he finds that he's the only one playing under, everyone else is playing like above, and then like he just dies to spy, that kind of thing. So it might actually be harmful, and I think like that sort of stigmatizes those that might want to search for mentorship. They might get the opinion that uh, other regions do not it's not worth getting other regions to mentor them simply because they don't know the situation in Asia. So it's very like paradoxical in that sense. Because on the one hand they want to improve, but then when they want to find mentors from other regions, what the mentors suggest might not be actually the most effective play in Asia, although it might actually be on paper the best play.
I see. Uh, Another interesting thing I've heard, if you don't mind, real quick, is that speaking of Sleepy Lake, I suggested to some Australians. I talked to some Australians about the prospect, and I heard actually that a lot of like Asian mentors, Australian mentors rather, have had bad experiences like socially with like racism and whatnot when interacting with Asian players and like the players they mentored, and were kind of turned off by that. Is that something like you'd have any experience or perspective on?
I think Fish and I wouldn't have much experience with racism because we are mostly the people that infract people
Right.
who are racist. Although
What?
I I would expect that to be the case in
I
that.
think I can
Mm,
share something more on this topic in regards to racism. So
Sure.
I think it's sort of a basically Asia has a very very systemic issue, and I feel like everything that like Fade has pointed out regarding ideology as well as strategizing, these are things that are congested within the ATF2L issue, right? Because ATF2L is unique in the sense that it is hosting a lot of different countries, different cultures, and different, basically different historicity. So historicity meaning like everyone is coming from a different place. Everyone has a different context. Everyone is raised differently, right? And this causes basically a very big cultural divide, right? There's a very big cultural divide between different players. It's not the same as NARGL, right? But for example, NARGL, right? You guys are from literally the same country. Even if these there are microcultures, for example, West Coast, East Coast, right?
Southerners.
They have, yeah, you guys have the same like sort of like philosophies, same ideas that are shared, right?
Right.
Likewise in ETF2L, like, though it's like one, it's different countries, correct? But these countries are interconnected, so the relationship is sort of strong. Like it's still strong between these players, right? Even though like for example, Dutch players, and then compared to like other European players, right? Uh, they can still connect correctly, right? Especially since they are connected or are connected under the universal language of English, for example. Asia is very, very unique in the sense that we have neither of those. We are not one country, and at the same time, our countries are disconnected. I feel like the only country that's connected is literally just Malaysia, Singapore, right? But for example, there's different countries intertwined in this league. Korea, there's a lot of Korean players. There's a very big Korean community. I see players from Hong Kong, lots of players from the Philippines, majority of which come from Singapore and Malaysia. There's also Indonesia. So there's so many cultures here. And it's very difficult to find a sort of unity, right? Because what becomes more apparent more is the divide. The divide is a lot more apparent than the unity between players, right? And this sort of creates the problem. The sort of creates the problem of toxicity. Toxicity, racism comes from these because a lot of players of I have had my fair share of because me and Faye, like we've been admins for a long time here in ATF2L. Me, I'm reaching my first year, right? I think my first year will be in April. So we've been hard at work at trying to quell or like trying to minimize the racism or like the toxicity that comes from ATF2L. But the main reason that comes from like the toxicity or the racism is like whenever I've asked multiple players who are committed multiple infractions, right? And their primary reason is like I was born like this is how I was raised, which is like very very alien to me. Like it's this how I was raised or this my culture, right? And it's simply because they don't, like it's the same thing like for example, like you can say any slur as long as like the person who is being affected isn't there. So because there's such a divide, there's a really big divide between players who has never interacted with somebody from another country. It's very easy for toxicity and racism to spread. And this creates a really big problem because remember because when you're toxic to other people or when you're racist to other people, most likely the person's not gonna like you. And if you have a whole community of them, we have a whole community of them. The people who are, who are good natured or would try to be friend or like not to be friends, but like sort of like have a different attitude, a different mindset. For example, Australian players, right? They would be dissuaded from entering the league. And it's sort of like a systemic problem because this creates a population issue, right? Which leads to fades ideology because less teams means less scrim time means less mentorship, but all of it boils down to like this population issue that's bred by toxicity. And it's sort of like a very very difficult problems that me, Spud, Fade have been trying to solve for like such a long time. So I'd like to hear your thoughts on that as like an NA admin blitz specifically because I feel like this is something
Hmm.
that's like very new concept to you, right? I know I see NA RGL. It's so easy for you guys to like just banhammer these guys, right? Yeah, but it's really interesting. Like it's interesting like how the culture like explains like how these things like take effect, right?
Hmm.
Such a
Okay.
different issue.
I think that's
Yeah.
something I'll get around to in a bit. I'll loop back around to that topic, but I did actually I was kind of wondering.
Mm.
Uh, so that sort of systemic cultural issue, I imagine, makes it really difficult overall to even get mentoring from other regions, right? Like to get help from other regions when your own region is like so subdivided, right? Like it kind of causes all of these other issues to be enabled, right? Yeah, like gameplay wise.
Yes.
Hmm. Okay. And would that be like one of the big potential factors you think might be present in just hurting the prospects of getting mentoring from other regions? What do you say?
What do you think, Faith? I'll pass this to you. But like, sorry. Oh, you go first, Faith. I saw you unmute.
Uh, uh, I, from my take at least, the issue I think is like because it happens on such a copious scale, it becomes very hard to eradicate because it is compounded by the population issue. So it's like what Fish said, RGL can just slap the ban hammer. Sometimes it's like very controversial, I think like with the case of Carl's toxicity. But I mean other smaller cases you can just like ban them. But Asia already has so little teams that we might be more careful to ban players because like we're banning already a currently active player. So in the sense that ATF2L we're living on unicorn's blood, like we already have a very small pool of players, and yet the current players that we have, they have this very toxic and racist mindset that might prevent more new players from entering the scene.
Hmm. Okay. Um,
Yeah, it's like a catch 22.
and has
No.
this like always been an issue for Asian TF2, or did this only become more of an issue at a certain point? And then is this something you'd see in other games as well, or is it kind of unique to TF2?
I'm not sure about other games, but I don't think this was always the case. So, I played TF2 competitively from around 2015 to 2019, but in 2019 I took like a 2-year break and only came back in around 2021. So I think between them, um, the ATF2 also about to be formed, and perhaps that was the turning point. I'm not sure what changed, but last time we used to have many more players, many more teams, and something took a turn. Maybe it was 30 becoming head admin. I'm not sure.
Okay. Um. So you mentioned trying to like solve this issue for a while, yeah? Like, what are some of
Yeah.
the ideas and ways you've tried to resolve it all? Because it sounds like a pretty enormous issue that might not necessarily be supported by the player base in terms of resolving.
You're exactly right in the part where like the entire player base doesn't necessarily support what we're doing. But I'd like to start since I feel like I'm the one who started it, and then I feel like
Sure.
Fade like made it a lot better. So the first thing that I did was I made the ATF2L what's it called again? The ATF2L behavior like basically I made like a policy, right? And it has like practically the same rules as RGL. You know, the usual: no racism, no toxicity, no harassment, no sending NSFW in the chat. Okay, it I made a very simple system for it, and I tried to run it by logic, right? Because I tried to make it so that people who want to be protected gets protected, while people who aren't, who don't really mind it, right? Who doesn't really mind like the toxic atmosphere, doesn't, unnecessarily report players. Because the last thing you want is like, oh, like these guys are like being toxic to each other, and then you put a ban hammer on one of them, and then the other guy's like, why'd you ban this guy, right? Like he's my friend. Right? So I tried to like go around that, and I said, okay, so these rules are in effect so long as somebody reported them, right? Because if somebody reported them, it means somebody got hurt, somebody was affected negatively. But if there was no report, it means that nobody got hurt, right? You guys are friends. So I made like that very, very specific reporting system, since it allows me to gauge whether or not, people are being affected. And to some it sort of quelled the toxicity and the racism, because a lot of players realize like, oh, like as long as like I'm talking to my friends, I'm not gonna get punished, right? Which, it allowed them to talk within their own groups, while at the same time, like, players from different new players who you get culture shocked, right, or get harassed, they find their protection. However, like, I feel like the main problem that I faced was that it's very difficult to find a punishment, because there is a policy that overrides my policy, right? The most I can do with my punishments is Discord banning. And if you think about it, like, if Discord banning is the maximum sentence that you can give for somebody who is a repeat offender, right? Then you're not really doing much in terms of like a league, right? Because,
Right.
like, I know RGL has match suspensions, has season suspensions, right? Here, I only have Discord bans, I only have mutes, I only have kicks. And eventually, people, like, the players caught on to that. They said like, oh, like, Fish's policy like doesn't have like power at all. It doesn't really do much, right?
Hmm.
Because like it's just there, like, just for like, just to like, for free. Like, it's just there. It doesn't do much. Like, so eventually, the hold that like my policy made became weaker and weaker, to the point that everything just went back to normal, went back to its norm.
Hmm.
And I feel like, it's very difficult to, go through that, especially since, it's, I don't have a lot of like punishing, like enforcing power when it comes to these things. And Fade followed that up with a different policy, so he sort of like changed what I wrote to make it a bit more enforcing. So Fade, it's your turn to talk about what you did.
Yeah, so essentially we took inspiration from Oxford where they had infraction points. We just call it demerit points. So basically, such cases of toxicity and racism will eventually lead you to match suspensions. So that I think that became much more effective. But I mean, some players just seem to still act with impunity towards these punishments. It's very hard on us to solve this issue because one is that some players just genuinely do not care about being banned, especially those that are Sixers players that just come to the ATF2L Discord just to cause problems for us. Like players like Fruit come to mind. They don't seem to mind getting banned in ATF2L because ATF2L is a smaller league compared to AFC Sixers. So we already know like who some of these players are. They're just here to cause trouble. So after their Discord timeout expires, they just like send NSFW into like general chat. So like we just need to keep just infecting them over and over again, but they just seem not to care. And then like the problem gets worse. They like start creating alt accounts and like do all these kinds of childish things. So especially when you create alt accounts on Discord, we don't know how to trace the origin. I think RGL has a neat little feature where you have to link your Discord account. Link your RGL account to Discord for you to join. That could be
Yeah, there's a verification
Yeah,
process.
that could be something
I
we
could
look
put you in
into.
contact with some of the RDL staff who know how to do stuff like that. Yeah, that could help maybe.
Yeah. So I mean, then we have to rely on our like really terrible UGC website infrastructure, which maybe you can talk
Jesus.
about later. But yeah, that's
Yeah, that's a topic for
another
later.
very pressing
Show that,
topic.
Blizz. Pull that up. Pull that up.
It's a very rudimentary infrastructure.
So you mentioned something about a policy that overrode your policy, though, Fish. Would you care to delve into that briefly?
So I didn't necessarily have a point system, right? Because I just wrote down like the infractions, the basic infractions, and I didn't assign like a value. I just wrote down like, hey, this what's gonna happen to you the moment you do this, right? And essentially the reason why it's very, very weak is because the ATF2L is a subsidiary of UGC. And UGC, I believe, has a overriding policy where like even the worst offenses that you can do there doesn't warrant. I believe it warrants like 1 to 2 match suspensions, but never a permaban. Right? Nobody gets permaban in UGC because the maximum sentencing there is like a few match suspensions as well as penalties for the team. So because UGC doesn't do it, ATF2L can't do it, right? Because we have to follow UGC. We're under UGC, and it became a very big difficulty for me to try and match, like very, very serious cases such as harassment, which knock on door, like it hasn't happened, but I like if these things happen, it's so difficult to enforce it in an ATF2L landscape, right? In ATF2L's landscape. And because of that, like we become like a hotbed, like we're like the punching bag of like a lot of players. Like they just come in, like as Fade said, cause trouble. And it's really just the limitations of what we have. But we are like me and Fade are like trying to like push it further to try and create the suspensions, especially since Fade is sort of like the pseudo head admin, right? And as long as like all four admins are on the same page, maybe we can do something about it to actually like change the culture of ATF, because essentially the main problem is changing the culture of ATF2L, right?
Okay.
That's the main thing that we have to do if we want to save it.
I think along these lines, I've been talking to Spud around last week when I met him in person. While he agrees that racism is an issue that needs to be solved, his views are different with regards to toxicity. He thinks that toxicity is inherent to a competitive game, and so we should not care so much about it. My thoughts about this are mixed because, on the one hand, in the spirit of competition, some people might let their emotions get the better of them. And if we infect that, we might be seen as overly policing it. On the other hand, I think it's very discouraging for a new player to literally get flamed with very unconstructive toxicity And when this is framed in a manner that puts down the player really doesn't know how to improve.
Okay.
So like the player doesn't know how to change. But there's just some differing opinions with regards to toxicity. Like how much should it actually be policed? I think in RGL, like I'm not sure what the toxicity policy is, or is there even a toxic culture? But all I know is that in Oxford, people are not really that
But
toxic, and
hey,
it's like
hey,
generally a pleasant experience.
just regarding that, like a footnote, I play in AM. There's an AM player that got banned for 6 months due to toxicity.
There's definitely some issues with toxicity in RGL, but the league does try. The staff care, and they do their best, like regardless. Like they try. Sometimes that's good. Sometimes that is enough, but they try and they care and they see the issues, and that's usually okay enough. But something that kind of interests me though, like, why do you think UGC has this policy they do, where players don't really get permabanned in it?
I can't really point the finger there because I haven't experienced UGC. I've experienced ATF2L, but I'm pretty sure UGC has a different set of admins, different culture that they have to face. But one thing I know is that because we're a subsidiary, it's very very difficult. Not very very difficult, but like it's something that like I haven't explored at all, so I don't know what issues they're facing precisely. I feel like you have like a lot. I don't know if you've played UGC and a Blizz, but yeah, like I feel like the players there have like a better experience in regards to UGC than us Asia
Uh,
players, because
no comment.
we only have 80, like here it's literally just AFC, ATF2, and I believe back then we had Pure. So those are like literally the only three, like the few leagues that we have there,
Hmm.
like back here in Asia. Like I think also ESEA, but yeah, it's like we don't necessarily have like a taste of like the UGC culture there. The only time that like I ever encountered it was when I was writing the policy and I published it. Right, I published it, and uh, I got I got comments regarding like, oh, you have to change this, you have to change this, and that's my experience at least. I I hope to understand why in the future, but yeah, that's where it comes from basically.
And have you tried just like getting in contact with UGC, like the higher ups more, and just like developing more of an understanding of it in the past?
Mm, I have not, but it's sort of like a bar. It's sort of like a bar. It's not like something that like I think. It's like it's not a bar that I think can be moved by Asia, at least for now, right? It's because like it's a because every other region follows it, right? And if Asia is like the only region that doesn't follow it, like it's very difficult, especially since like what you call that, like these other regions like UGC and I think there's also South America. What else? Like I don't know if there's UGC EU. I forgot like the admins. Yeah, there is EU. There is EU. Yeah, but these communities have bigger populations than Asia,
Hmm.
right? And it's sort of like it's very different. Like oh, like if we don't follow UGC and A, right? If we don't follow UGC and A, or we don't follow like the policy of like the higher up leagues, right? It's like we're going to hemorrhage more players in our league. And it's like something like, it's part of the catch 22. Like we cannot move a lot. We can't be liberal. We can't be experimental with the way that we do these things. Or like we can't be too, like experimental, because the moment we do, right? No, like for example, we make one wrong decision and boom, half our player base is gone, right? Just to put it into perspective, Blizz, I
Mhm.
showed you like a graphic there, right? But
Yeah, the infractions.
our not the infraction one, the one like the UGC all teams list,
Oh yeah, the T.
right? In the past 3 seasons, I believe we were around the 17-16 team mark for the league, for the entire league, which includes platinum, silver, and steel. Traditionally, we would have 5 teams each league, but ever since that time, which was I think 3 seasons ago, so like 1.5 years ago, or 1 to 1.5 years ago. Now we barely have 12. 12. I remember, like, well, I don't know the actual count, Fade. Like, Fade can confirm that, but it's gotten to the point where we had to temporarily dissolve silver as a division because we only had three: steel, silver, plat. We had to remove the middle league just so that we can make two competent leagues with balanced teams. Like, that's how much we're hemorrhaging players.
Hmm.
Which is why,
Okay.
like, it's hard for us to maneuver. It's a really choky, like, it's like a stranglehold type of situation. Like, we have to like make riskier decisions, but at the same time, if we do make these risky decisions, we might just end up blasting out the entire league. Like, there's no more league. So yeah, what do you think about that,
Yeah,
Fade?
I sent the statistics to the chat.
Yeah, I'm looking
So
over
like,
now.
season 33 is the inception of ATF12. So that was ATF12 season 1. I mean, this yet another reason why our infrastructure is so antique. It couldn't even like calibrate the numbers. So as you can see, like our player numbers have been like steadily dwindling. Like in part that's because like of unbalanced matches. Most of it is arguably due to admins sandbagging. I mean specifically Clarity, like facilitated by Setna, but that's like a controversy. But like we
Okay.
can talk about that another time, or maybe like not the topic of today's discussion.
I
A
think we can
second
include it, but maybe a
podcast.
little bit later into it. Yeah, we could focus more on just like other admins. Um, so with the sort of social situation you have there, it makes it very hard to even entertain the idea of just like moving to an alternative league that's focused on your own region, right? Like you might kind of be dependent on the infrastructure and existing player base that UGC has because you can't even risk dividing the player base further than it is already, yeah? So it's like you kind of just have to make do with what you're dealt.
Correct.
Actually,
Yeah.
okay, maybe fish first.
Oh no, as I said, to me at least, like it's like that's accurate. What do you think,
Okay.
Fade?
My take is that I think the infrastructure and the hierarchy of UGC is not. It is a big problem, but I don't think it's the main problem. I think the power of a region is based on its community and its people, and I think regardless of what region, or like regardless, like if ATF2L is under RGL, ETF2L, or most likely OSFOR, I don't think that would change much of the issues on in Asia.
Hmm. Okay.
Because yeah, if anything, like it might die even faster. In the past, we had this league called Respawn League. It's basically Oxford, like Oxford, like Respawn League, it's like merged with Oxford. So basically, it's Respawn League, and like signups were like 6 teams, 5 teams a season. So that was not very good. To, I mean, that was also in part because like Clarity himself was a Respawn League admin, and he was like constantly bad mouthing Respawn League, but that could be another issue
Oh man.
altogether.
A third podcast.
Nah, we'll get it on this one. This
Yeah.
is gonna be a bit of a longer one, but
No worry.
okay. So before I think we delve into clarity and that whole bag of worms next, but like what would you even classify UGC as a whole as? Like what are your like are your points of contact even aware of like the issues of the region? If so, like what's kind of preventing them from like helping you more or giving you like the independence or policy that you need to be able to act on things? Because like ultimately, regardless of what you think, regardless of like the state of other leagues as a whole, they should probably allow the people who have experience with the league, like with the players who are trying to protect the players, right? Like they're still responsible for what happens regardless of the
Yeah.
region. So it's just like what's kind of going wrong there.
Uh, do you want to go first, Fade, or me?
You can go first.
Okay, so at least I think like yeah, like Fade pointed out there is a distinct link to the community that admins have to protect. I feel like at least from my talks with General Nick in the past, because General Nick is our our general, like our actual like UGC manager here. he has talked about the problem of racism and toxicity with clarity, right? And that was like one of the first issues that I encountered with the policy, right? Because I had to go through Clarity to publish it, and Clarity is a head admin. So being a head admin ATF2L is like like a very powerful position because Clarity has at least like the head role. Right now, Clarity is no longer the head admin, but whoever the head admin was had ultimate like authority over match disputes, which included the like toxicity claims as well as bad sportsmanship, right? It also included racism, like especially every single rule that comes through ATF2L has to go through the head admin. And because of that, the head admin's opinion is very important. Clarity's opinion regarding racism was very like it's very resigned position, right? Like he enforced it in the past and then he gave up. And then I think his belief is that because it didn't work during his time, it will never work. Like that's how he thinks like Asia is, right? Because I remember his experience was like, oh, like I tried quelling racism, right, by having like a bot, like he turned on the bot that removes NSFW content and racism in the chat, and people who do it get instantly kicked. Because the moment he did that, nobody talked in general chat, and then when he turned it on again, everyone was talking in general chat. And because like that's his opinion regarding like these issues in the league. And since clarity like specifically has very like like his opinion is a lot more potent, right? Because he has a lot more experience. I think he was like General Nick's like only Asia, like General Nick appointed him like all the way back in the start. So General Nick has a very big trust on clarity, which is brought about by his like his years of experience. So General Nick trusts clarity when it comes to the racism part, which is why like he also like General Nick like this like of course like coming from NA has like very very strict opinions on racism, right? As well as toxicity, but because clarity explained it to him from his perspective, General Nick also rode with it. Which is why like the overriding opinion is racism is okay in Asia, shrug.
So there was a
He
lot of
shrugged.
bottlenecks in place. Okay.
Yeah. So those
Uh,
are like sort of like the pillars that are holding us in place right now, which I feel like Fade as like an admin's like trying to like debate against, right? What do you think, Fade?
Yeah, I think it's the biggest issue stems from the head admin's indifference towards racism and toxicity. Like, I think on many occasions, Clarity himself has stated that he doesn't care about what happens to the league. He said something like, I'm quoting him, that I will just be the head admin until the league dies, or like until it ends, or something like that. Like, he has accepted the fact that the league will probably die soon, and he's not is perfectly content in doing nothing to even slow it down from dying.
Damn, okay. I guess if like the head admin sort of, starts to believe that, loses hope and just kind of lets that happen, then it's really hard for the individual player to like even think that things could be different or to care either.
Yeah, definitely. Although in recent times, UGC has given us permission to create our own legislation. Let me send you the rules page because
Okay.
now we have a separate rules page for ATF2L.
So I will say something interesting. I'm looking at the staff page and it seems kind of outdated as well. Like I don't see you. I don't see Fish listed on it, like the UGC staff page. Have they just not updated it? like,
The UGC one or the ATF2L one?
like they have Team Fortress 2 Asia listed under the admin page. So like, have they just not updated it in all of this time?
Perhaps.
But
Oh Jesus
Yeah.
Christ!
yeah. What the?
It's updated okay, it's updated September 26, 2020.
Like, who's keeping the lights on at UGC even? Like, why hasn't it been updated? That seems pretty important.
Yeah,
I
I think
mean,
that UGC in general is like very outdated.
Yeah,
Like their
I think
website
it's
and
like
the
a
league.
known issue already, but the entirety of UGC have like if you played in the UGC in the past 4 seasons, I believe, you do not have a medal.
Damn.
Like they have not given out the medal. So I feel like it's it's like it's a common it's like I think it's like a popular issue right now in UGC. So yeah, that's something that's like being like UGC also has their own demons. And as a byproduct, ATF2L has a lot of demons also. So we
So
have yeah, we're fighting for TF2 here.
Yeah,
is
this particular issue is like just stemming back from their infrastructure, like being very outdated.
is Clarity not the head admin anymore? Though you said.
I think he's stepping down
Hmm.
soon.
Okay. Uh, I guess what were Clarity's like motivations initially, kind of like before it kind of reached the point of burnout? Because to me it sounds like burnout, right? Like I wouldn't hope that the head admin would be maliciously intended, so it'd be interesting to get more of like a nuanced take on it all, I guess.
I mean, if I were to describe Clarity, right? I feel like Clarity was given too much responsibility because back then Clarity was like literally the only admin. Like I'll probably like I'll probably put like sort of like a more realistic perspective of Clarity when I talk to him about it. I'm pretty sure Fade has like a varying perspective because Fade has experienced like working with Clarity more. But at least from how I interacted with him in the past, he seemed like a guy that like was given a lot of like he was given the burden of like not just like one region, but he had to control, not control, but like he had to lead so many communities, right? Which had its own varying cultures, own varying perspectives, and it's very difficult to do that. So just to humanize Clarity a bit, like he was given a lot of responsibilities. Like I remember when me and Fade, like when I just started joining as an admin, right? Clarity literally was the only person who knew how to operate the website, like operate the scores and all that shit. I
Damn.
remember that. So he was like the only one that was entrusted that responsibility. And I feel like, one of his errors was like he didn't really know, like he didn't really trust like any one of us to like continue the effort. Like he felt like since he was like the one who had the most years, the most experience, like he should be the one to head it and nobody comes close, right? Recently Fade has been coming close because he has been working with Clarity closely for like the past years. But yeah, like nobody came close because he was like literally the only one that stayed. And because he was the only one that stayed, right? He's the only one that's like rightful of like the head admin, right? Because he knew every rule. He's like sort of like the bookworm type of admin. Like, oh, according to the rules, this is what should be done. According to the rules, this is what should be done, right? There was no other admin input because most of the time he was correct, right? And yeah, to his credit, he was very, critical when it comes to these things. But I feel like his main flaw was that he had the inability to entrust it to another person. So the moment that me and Fade came in, it was difficult for him to let go, right? Which is why I was very
Right.
surprised that he stepped down. So that's how I view Clarity, right? From like a more human
Hmm.
sense.
I see. Yeah, that definitely adds a lot more nuance to it. Like compared to the submarine interview that I did in the past, especially, it's a much more
I,
nuanced take on
I
it.
heard that. I heard that one.
So
But
that's
yeah, but
definitely
he's like,
interesting to
yeah.
hear. Is it something that you ever just like try to reach out to Clarity about, to, like just try and give your perspective on it, or did it kind of never even get to that point where you sort of shut out before that?
I've talked to Clarity in the past, and he would always tell me like he didn't really explain it, but he would tell me like, "Fish, this part of the admin, everyone will hate you, this isn't my Clarity experience, but like that's what he said. Like a lot of people don't see what I see. Like that's what he says. I don't know if like Fade agrees with that, but yeah, that's what he told me like at the start of me being an admin. I've had clashes with him in the past, so it's very difficult to like sort of like know him now because like I've been very distant ever since that. But that's what I remember Clarity as an admin, right? Fade is like down to like give a very very contrasting opinion though.
Alright,
no.
I also partially agree with.
make it so.
Uh, I was just like about to say that I think that could likely be true. It's the issue is probably just that Clarity is first not very good at delegating tasks. So like, he just like oversees everything. Like he just put too much on his plate. Even when like he hired more admins, like like he was still the one like mainly managing everything. For example, on the UGC staff list that you sent, basically all the other division managers were just there to approve or deny transfers into like the lower
Yeah.
divisions. And like Clarity was still the one like handling everything from disputes to operating the website. Because I mean the website is actually quite labor intensive in the sense that you have to submit a score, then the admin has to approve it, and like there's many other things you need to do like for bi-weeks, blah blah blah. It's very complicated. So it's quite labor intensive. It's like maybe like 30 minutes if you're fast, like 30 minutes a week. um so it's yeah, it's not very efficient of a process, and like he was doing everything by himself. I mean, like all that just goes with an infrastructure, but maybe after doing that for years and years he could have been very burnt out. Like a submarine like response would be, I'm not sure how true this is, but like this is probably something submarine would think, and part of me like thinks that this is possibly the reason also. Because he got all the medals that he wanted to. His season that he retired, he got first place in silver by sandbagging again. And then like probably after that, like he was content, possibly. But like maybe it's a combination of both. It's more nuanced, like you said. Like
Yeah.
a combination of being burnt out and like he achieved everything he wanted to, medal
Okay.
wise.
That definitely gives it some more depth. I'm pretty satisfied with that. Um, do you guys like have any regrets over all of it? Like, do you think there's anything you could have done to kind of just like help Clarity more, or was it just sort of a case where you really weren't able to, like, because of the situation Clarity put himself into and was put into?
I don't think there's much that we could have did because he likes to handle everything by himself. He didn't delegate much.
Right. Okay. That makes sense.
Yeah, the other admins like were literally just there to approve Clarity's like ridiculous transfers, like approve like transfers of very good players into his team. I mean, it's a very cynical way to put it, but yeah,
So basically, just to like yes man and make it like a little bit better PR wise.
yeah, I suppose so.
That's unfortunate. That would definitely make sense from what I've heard, though. Okay. Um, what are some of the other sorts of like faces of the Asian community? Like, what are the other sorts of like prominent players and teams to fit into this picture here? And influences on the community.
Um, if I'd like to start, like
Yeah.
basically like ATF2L, like amidst like aside from like how like differences has caused issues in the past, like I try to see it as like sort of like a two-sided coin. ATF2L, like in its differences and its divides, has born from it like very like it's sort of like the I had like a theme of that like in high school. It's called like unity and diversity, and the reason why is because like even though like we are like a league made of like fragmented communities, I find it very very beautiful. Like I find it very very like awesome, right? That different communities of different teams uh unite to try and make the common goal of winning ATF2L. So different basically like in ATF2L there has been time and time again communities that try to raise up the highest TF2 talent from their region and try to compete against each other in the plat scene. So I have given you like some examples there.
Yeah,
The main one,
Daybreak, Underworld
yeah,
Banishment, the Taiwanese community, I'd assume Koreans as well.
yeah, these guys have time and time again have produced like very very competitive and like highly like competitive and mechanical games, right? And it's brought about by just like a community like like they what you call that, like ATF2L or the Asia community might be very toxic, but something that's like been very common is that if they see like very, very good talent, they would make it the point to race it, right? So something that I would like to highlight, it's the Taiwanese community. So that is Hop's team. Hop's team uh was mainly composed of players from their community. So they would have like an entire community that they would play with, like in terms of pugs in themselves, and they would have like same language team, same language pugs that like, and then same language, and like in the same server, and then they would try to make like these talented individuals become like the best players that they can be. An example of which was Nebula, who is a who he started out as a steel heavy, but has grinded his way to plat and has been part of Hobbs's team ever since. And I feel like that is like a very, very good example of like, like a lot like ATFL gets a really bad rap in terms of toxicity and racism, right? If you're like, if you're not one of us, like fuck you, right? But if like those people who are like, like their same country, their countrymen, right? They would try to raise up to such a high level, and it produces a very, very like, a very, very fruitful experience, a very, very fruitful season, right? So I think Fade can give a lot more detailed explanations of these teams, right? Especially since he's the one who's been competing with them. So I like to start like, what do you think about Daybreak Fade?
I think like uh the things surrounding these teams that are mostly region based is mostly from Thailand, Korea, like it's in South Korea. Just to clarify, Taiwan, Korea, and uh, Taiwan, Korea.
Silent, Hazel.
Wait. What was I saying? Yeah, Thailand, Korea, and Taiwan. Yes.
Yeah.
They mostly play within their own communities. For example, like they don't play pugs and mixes with other teams in Asia. And when they form their team, like it's probably just all exclusively like this team is all Taiwanese players, and there are no Taiwanese players outside of this Taiwanese team. So like not much is known about these players. So I mean, that being said, the atmosphere there is I could imagine to be like less toxic and more encouraging. Like Fish said, this will help players grow. But Asia being a relatively uh gated community in the sense that it's very oblivious to the meta in other regions, this downside will not be very apparent for these teams that play basically in their own country. For example, Daybreak on Swiftwater, they actually used to hold on Swiftwater second. They used to hold on the garage on the right side, which is like UGC season 10 levels. I'm not sure if you guys know what I'm talking about. But normally people play in the spiral stairs, the one way, like from attacker's POV, they play on like the top
The
left.
shutter, yeah.
Yeah, the one way shutter. But they used to hold in the garage in the right side.
Do you mean the
right...
mansion?
Yes, the mansion.
Luigi's
So,
mansion. Alright, got it.
yeah, so they have their own very unorthodox ways to play, but it might not be
How
as
did they
big of a
win?
detriment. They
They're
didn't
like
win
the
on
most
Swiftwater.
dominant
That
team.
Swiftwater was their worst match. I mean,
Damn.
like not counting
Gotta keep
Steel,
it real,
but
huh?
yeah,
Just for
yeah,
reference, Liz, they're a very, very dominant team. Daybreak.
yeah. They used to be a very dominant team until they disbanded. Although like that could be due to a variety of reasons, some even political. For example, Stenna, which is one of the old admins and recently became an admin again, made it his point to like he basically made it public that he hated the other Koreans. I'm not sure what exactly he did, but maybe one of the reasons that Daybreak's no longer a thing is because of Senna. I'm not sure. He might even be proud of that. I'm not sure. But basically, these other region teams do tend to play in the upper echelons of ATF2L. Generally, ATF2L, the community is such that there's all the Southeast Asian players. The Koreans play within their own community, the Thais play within their own community, and the Taiwanese, which are not as active right now, they play within their own community. That's sort of how it's structured. And generally, these like the Thais and the Koreans, less so the Taiwanese, they maybe like send one plat team, like one high team and one low team to participate every season. Until recently, of course, where we had a decline in the number of teams. But yeah, that's around how it is structured in Asia.
Okay. Definitely sounds like some interesting lore there, yeah. It's not something we would really see in NA in the same sense where it's just like so many micro cultures of just like these different teams. You'd kind of see it
Yep.
at ETF12, but then also there's like a decent bit less of a divide when it's between like Western European countries, like they're kind of in one bit more of a group, and then you have like the Eastern European countries, like the more Slavic ones that kind of fit into their own subgroup. But then in Asia, I guess it's a lot more like even compared to Europe, like based off of the individual teams. So that's like a massive cultural divide, I imagine. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yep. I think they developed their own like metas as well. I can't think of something on top of my head right now, but yeah, like their own meta, like
Hmm.
probably like excessively using Kritzkrieg is something I can think of my mind right off the bat.
Yeah, I've seen that one before in Asia. Okay. Let's see. So we've covered the faces mostly. Now we've covered how it's a bit different along with the culture. Would you like to delve into the state of the league more, or do you think we've covered that one enough as well?
Yeah, for me at least, I don't think it's the legislation or like even UGC. It's mostly the community, and
Okay.
that's what makes it hard to change, in my opinion.
Right, like realistically, there's only so much you could do as a league when you're kind of based off the community, and if the community itself doesn't want to change, like you kind of have to fight a community battle first and just be a member of the community more than you are an admin in order for things to change, I'd say.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah. I mean, we can go on and on. Like, we can even complete the Google Docs that you put in your article about like in terms of skill wise and like the gameplay, like how Asia plays. Like, I definitely have a lot to say about that. But I think most of the issue stems from the social issues.
Right.
Like, yeah,
I mean, if I'm to be very honest, like yeah,
Sure.
like I could point a lot of problems regarding like the social issues of Asia, but I feel like it's sort of like a two-way street. Like though these were the problems presented to Asia, I feel like like us admins have also dropped the ball when it came to like mandating these things. Like I feel like we came in short when it came to like these are effects of practically like both the community as well as the admins like mishandling of it over the past few seasons, and we're simply experiencing the effects of it. So these things, like like for example, like the toxicity, like I feel like if better decisions were made back then, we wouldn't be having this problem right now, right? So I feel like it's a very sad situation because there's a lot of regrets in there's a lot of regrets that happened in the past that I feel like if I was admin back then, I should have done something. But sadly, I'm an admin like last year, right? But I feel like yeah, it's a two-way street. Like the same way that like the players sort of had their issues. I don't think it's entirely the community's fault because it's also one half how the community was managed, right? Because you can see like there's so many strengths to ATFL also. Like we pointed out how like there's unity and diversity when it comes to them encouraging their own country's talent, like these communities, and at the same time there's unified communities like for example like Fade's team, right? It's like it's not just like it's not just Korean teams, Thai teams, Taiwanese. Like there's also like a unification in terms of like the other countries like binding together by just pure skill alone, and then trying to test their metal when it comes to these very talented players. Like there's so many positives, there's so many highlights to this team that I feel like gets forgotten when it's put under the veil of racism and toxicity. and it's very very sad how like admins in the past and sort of like our admins like inability to quell it now highlighted the negatives of Asia more than its positive. So it's a very very tragic tale. Yeah, missing Fade.
Yeah, it's very sad because it could have been very good if perhaps we were under a different set of leadership, or like ATF2L was formed under RGL Oxford. I I think like the issue was there in the inception of ATF2L, but we just allowed it to grow to the point that now it's like going out of control, and like we had
Right.
less than 10 teams.
And it's like entrenched in the community as a norm, yeah.
Yeah, yes, that's like the saddest part.
Hmm. Okay. Uh so what are your current like sort of like hopes and goals? Like what are you kind of planning to do in terms of actualization about these issues?
This upcoming Sixes season will be the first season that we are going to start to dish out, or like start to act on our suspensions, because previously like people who were like toxic and like say racial slurs, they weren't getting enough infraction points to the point that they'll get merit suspended. But this will be the first season that they will start to feel the impact of actually not only sabotaging themselves but their team, because now they can't even play matches. So hopefully this will change, like players will realize the gravity of their actions through these consequences of like accumulating infraction points. I'm not sure how this would impact the community as a whole. It could go both ways. Like it could lead to ATFCL's demise even faster, where like these toxic vocal minority might coax the rest to like boycott the league, or it could like go the other way around. So it could be like a very double-edged sword. Like many players will not like this change that we made, although it's like not too recent, but only recently have enough players gain enough demerit points for us to warrant league suspending them.
Hmm.
So
Okay.
maybe that will yeah, discourage them after like their team starts losing, because like for example like they just lost like two of their mains, for example.
Jesus. Yeah, I mean, I'm also pairing that like as PR manager, it's a really big project that I've been working on for the past season, which comes in the form of like a campaign, a PR campaign to try and create that last injection of players. Because TF2 is a very very small community when it comes to player size. Like if you segment it by regions, right? The biggest being NA. But I believe there's a lot of players still that have yet to even touch ATF2L or competitive TF2 as a whole. And something that like me and Fade and Spud have been working on is trying to reach out to that audience more. And that's something that like we can do. The only issue is that we didn't want to do it while while ATF2 is still toxic, because it's sort of like a systemic problem, right? If the league's still toxic and then we try to get more players in, the more players will see how shitty our league is, and then they even more they're not. We're basically like we're basically running like a bad PR campaign that's gonna dissuade more people. But if the community is receptive to the changes, especially the changes towards racism, towards things that would naturally dissuade players from other regions, maybe it's possible for us to create like a lasting community, right? So
Right.
these are things that like me and Fade are trying to reach out for. We're trying to campaign towards, so that ATF2L as a league would continue to thrive for probably like seasons to come, right?
Hmm.
And yeah, and to try and like at the very least like get these communities back. Because the sad part of it is like as Fade mentioned before, like the communities that we've talked about in the past, like Daybreak, or I think Daybreak. I don't know which other teams are returning, but so far like none of the country centric teams have returned. And I feel like if we try to create a more positive or accepting community, they might they might come back, which is our hope. Yeah.
One last hurrah, huh? Yeah, it's fair.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely, like, with the community as a whole kind of being the source of an issue, like, I would say you kind of just need to be able to inspire people to want things to change, and the only way that's really going to happen is if you get like respected players, community leaders, people with influence to go and say that like, hey, this needs to change, the status quo isn't good. Like, if you want to inspire people, you need to inspire them, you know? You need to kind of have people who can source that. So that definitely seems like a hopeful aspect. Yeah. Um, okay.
I think like to wrap up what we've been saying for the past 1 hour, I think it's like a chicken and egg problem where like we have a very low population and then the mentality and the attitudes of the people in the current playing population. So like the mentality like prevents more new players from joining ATF2L, like adding to our player pool, our player base, and then that in itself is like causing the perpetual like negative mindset because right now like I don't think it's a very nice experience to play ATF2L. Like the negativity breeds more negativity. So like recently I joined an Oxford team and then like I just asked them about their opinions for Asia and this is what they told me. So let me see if I can find this. Yeah, this is what they told me. I'm gonna send it in. So basically Australia is already 3 hours behind and like some of them they do like play in ATF2L if like people invite them to join their team. Although it's probably only the more motivated Asian team leaders that are willing to tap into other regions to expand their player pool. But as you can see, like the attitudes are of Asian players are just like really bad. It's not a very nice playing experience.
I see.
Yeah, that might be another hope also. Like I noticed that a lot of Asia players like try to get into, RGL, try to get into ETF2L, like at least like play for their team so that they could get like especially Aussie Fortress. Like a lot of Asian players go there because the environment there is at least like accommodating, as well as it's something that they can prove is like sort of like a competitive landscape. I feel like if we improve the league, then maybe we can attract like an audience from other countries who are normally like dissuaded. Like for example, like our neighboring league, Aussie Fortress, like from Australia. Like I've also seen like I've recruited like European players also. I know NA is like a different story because like it's 200 pings,
And like the
but
time zone.
yeah, like maybe if we get like if we improve our league, like the hope is also to sort of like unite with other leagues, get players from them like who would like to compete in a different environment, as long as like it's accommodating. So yeah,
Yeah,
that's what
because
I
right
think.
now like Highlander at least just feels like organized 9v9, like with comms. That's like the state of the gameplay. But like we said, the issue is not just with the state of gameplay. Although that could be a factor. Just I mean I'm just going off tangent a bit. Maybe the reason for the mentality is because the s- the perceived skill gap is very big even within the same uh region. For example, in Asia Platinum, the first place team, that's my team, we beat the second place team. Like we just like rolled them. They didn't even like get off a round. I think like they like within like because Asia plays like first to four halves for KOF. We just like 4 the other team. Like the other team just like probably just kept 1 minute of the entire 4 rounds of like KOF Brute. And like Swiftwater, I think we just rolled them in like 4 minutes. Like that's between the first and second place. I mean, maybe not as bad. Like considering like last season, there's like Demento's team against Square. There's also quite a big difference. But then like the second and third team was also like something similar, I believe. So maybe there's like a very large perceived skill difference. Although like I don't think this is the skill gap between teams. I don't think it's as big as what players think it is because like I've watching like RGL custom matches like there are still like a good number of 4-0s and like 2-0s. It's not that bad. The problem just lies when players think that there's nothing they can do about it, and I think that is where the loss of hope comes from. And maybe when there's no hope, there's no more desire to improve. So like maybe that's maybe like the players like skill level like slash gameplay is also tied to their attitudes. I'm not sure. It's probably more multifaceted than that. But these are like all the small little contributing factors.
Yeah, for sure. I would definitely say hope is kind of an integral part of it. If you don't have hope, if you don't have people think that things even have the chance to like get better and change, then they're not really going to like put the effort in to try and see that change. They're not going to potentially make themselves a target, you know?
Yeah, perhaps it's also because like the so-called mentors of like newer teams are the people like in play that are like getting 4-0, like losing 4-0. Like they themselves are not that motivated to improve. So like maybe that mentality like spreads down to their mentees.
Oh yeah, definitely. Like when the people who know better than you that are kind of like guiding you through don't really have hope, that kind of tends to rub off on you.
Perhaps and like compounded with like the very small scene. So we don't have
Wait,
like
you're
many new players.
forgetting the key ingredient. The key ingredient. The biggest problem of them all. No medals.
Yeah, I mean medals are definitely like an extrinsic motivation.
The biggest motivation of all, which we don't have. I'm, I'm not joking, but yeah. I feel like if I feel like a lot of like our problems also can be solved by the medals. I feel like the admins in UGC are working on that right now. But yeah, if we have like that extra, that extra payment,
Extrinsic
quote unquote,
motivation.
or like extrinsic motivation, like we probably have me and Fade will like have an easier time quelling the herd. Yeah,
So, do you think what you're doing right now, you kind of like your plans are going to be enough, or do you think there's something more that like other regions could do to help, that like the players could do to help? You know, like what do you need the community and other communities to do? What would you need other admins to do to kind of help with you, like other leagues do to help? You know?
I think just as like punishment requires the cooperation of many parties. I think that's definitely needed in Asia as well because I think ultimately people don't really care about ATF2L. So like we probably need the cooperation of other leagues to extend our punishments to the leagues that they care more about, i.e. sixes, and possibly even the servers, like just get them suspended on Quicksilver and maybe serve me servers as well. Although like very recently our players have retaliated by like getting their own server. So I'm not sure. We might be losing our influence in that regard as well. So for me, at least what I'm doing, like moving forward, I'm trying to operate more on the grassroots level. I'm trying to like help more than one team because like right now I'm in another team, but like getting involved in other teams as well, like encouraging them to get mentorship from other regions, pick up players from other regions, and generally just try to encourage them to invest, like convince them that it's worth to invest their time and effort into playing Highlander.
Hmm.
So
Okay.
like that's that stuff like yeah, just like encouraging them to like treat scrims seriously, like come up with a strategy before and like don't be like 30 minutes late for your own scrim, that kind of thing.
Right.
yeah.
Hmm.
What do you think,
What is
That
Fish?
enough? I'm not sure.
I guess like something that like we've sort of been doing, like yeah, like probably no something that we've been doing also is like uh to Fade's credit, I think like also different players credits also. I think Jin, Peko, Nico, these guys have been doing a hell of a job when it comes to our pug scene. Because though we don't really have a lot of teams right now, uh Fade's team of like pug mixers, pug hosters, mix hosters have been ensuring that like ATF2L is like alive through their the pug scene. Like I think almost like every other day there's a pug. Or like they make sure that every week there's a pug, but they try to make it as often as possible. And because there's so many people that frequent pugs, like, like, yeah, it's difficult to make a team. It's difficult to attend mentorship practices, but it's always accessible to attend a pug. Like, this has been like single-handedly been like keeping like sort of like the lifeblood of ATF2L. And if there's something I can ask, probably what you call it, can probably ask other region admins. Maybe it would help if like you add like, not saying that it's the same, but like, if like it's probably like a good idea if like we can make like some sort of international sort of like pug scene. That's something that like it's sort of like just a random thought, right? What if like we like like have like a pug scene where like there's multiple players from like different regions just playing like basically like on Wednesdays, like it's an Asia server, but like anyone from any region can join. And then on Fridays like NA, on Saturdays EU. Wouldn't that be nice? I don't know. Sotspeed. Sotspeed and Blizz.
I think other regions at least will have enough players to have their own, like, we'll be able to populate this park server with their own region players. So
Yeah,
like it might not work out, like, especially like time zones considered.
for sure. I mean, like, because I know RGL has like sort of like a small issue when it comes to late night pugs. They like late night pugs. What if your late night pugs are in Asia? No, that's just a
Based.
joke. That's just a joke.
Okay.
What if though? What if though, Blizz? What
What
if?
if, unless dot dot
What if?
dot?
Unless. But that's for another day. That's for another podcast.
How about just like the average
Yeah,
players? Like, do you think that it would help a lot if other players, mentors, whatnot, would be like a lot more open-minded, or just like do reviews, like, and just leave like a video up of the demo, like even if they can't do it live or so? Like, would it help a lot if other regions were just like more open-minded about helping Asian players, about mentoring them, about letting them play potentially because of all the issues that Asia faces in its own region? Like, would that help you?
As in mentoring, like in demo reviews.
Yeah, just like reviews in general.
I think the issue with getting players from other regions to mentor Asians is twofolded. One is that mentors might not be willing to mentor Asians because, like, for example, you need to find a time that you're free, and that probably means like staying up to 3 a.m. Like, that's one. And the other issue is that, like, general they don't like the toxicity that surrounds Asian and like even Australians, like I said, like the racism that surrounds them. Like if you watch a log, you probably see someone say the N word in chat, like, oh sorry, a demo, like, kind of thing.
Hmm.
The other phase of the issue is that there's generally and unfortunately there's a negative stigma towards other regions, in that I don't think necessarily that Asians think that other regions are worse than them, but they are quite close-minded because they just think that doesn't mean it works in other regions means it works in Asia. I mean, that's definitely true, but there could still be value, and I'd argue more value in getting other regions to mentor you. But basically, they're just using that alone to say why they shouldn't get mentored. Maybe they're just like coming out with excuses themselves, maybe. But because like the major, or at least a good number of major community influencers say this way, that just sort of discourage players from seeking out mentorship from other regions. There are definitely some notable exceptions, and I'm happy for these players. They have managed to find like really solid mentors for themselves, and I think it definitely shows like they're really improving.
Hmm. So if collaboration will like help a lot, but there's like all of this bias both ways against that potential collaboration, like what could players, admins, like everybody do from like both in and out of region to sort of help facilitate that? Like what steps could you take towards solving it?
I think we could take something along the lines of what you did for Bake's Park server, where you'd written a Highlander guide maybe in the future we could get uploaded videos, VODs, demo reviews, and perhaps actually officially feature them on ATF2L, like either during our Discord, like or something like that. So at least this is sort of a league approved guide, if that
Okay.
makes sense.
Yeah, it
Not sure whether
does.
that will like not sure whether that will like gain a lot of um support or like even recognition. Some people might even like laugh it off. But I think like maybe from the point of view of a new player is like, oh, I watched like a demo review that's like approved, or like, oh, I watched like this like Benny video, like a demo man rollout on like, I don't know, Gully Watch, for example, like talking about sixes. Like, oh, this is approved by Benny. I think it must bear some value, and the admins like greenlit it as well. So maybe that will
Alright.
like shape their
So like
mindset.
it's like vetted community kind of like collaboration, like mentoring sorts of
Yeah,
things
yeah,
that aren't necessarily live, which would also kind of cut out the issue of time zones a bit more.
yeah.
Okay.
Maybe not just gameplay related, perhaps like also just mentality. I think you've like written a guide on like how like the mindset you should have and how to improve as a player.
Right.
Like maybe stuff like that.
So
That
like
could help.
more socially focused media in general, just like share between leagues, between kind of regions would help, you think?
Yeah, I think that definitely would. But maybe not just pertaining to social issues, maybe like also just gameplay wise, because it's probably integrated.
Right. Hmm.
Yeah,
Okay.
that could be the way going forward.
That definitely seems like an interesting aspect. I know, like you've asked, Fish has asked for like some of my perspective on that, and kind of just like reaching to that briefly, kind of that perspective, that community collaboration, that just like more literature, more awareness in general, spreading between regions and open-mindedness towards other regions is going to help a lot, especially in regions where a large part of the issue is due to standards set in their own region and not really understanding different perspectives.
Agreed.
Alright, cool. Uh, okay. So like would that be something you would ask from players, admins, other regions basically, just to like help with that a bit to try and extend that offer?
I mean, in the ideal world, yes. Although, like, other than you, I don't have many connections with other regions. I mean, Australia, yes, but I think like their scene is also relatively small. It could be more credible to get RGL or ETF2L to do so, because like that is in fact like at least my philosophy for Highlander, in that I see like the maps the whitelist used in other regions, and then like I see where we can apply them to Asia. Because I think in your previous interview summary, like the maps and whitelist previously was a bit odd.
Mountain Lab, altitude, definitely some
Yeah,
odd choices there.
yeah. Basically the principal admin deciding the maps and whitelist has changed from like Senna to me. So like playing uh more approved, tried and tested maps currently. Yeah, but I think like more broadly, we can discuss like more broadly in like Highlander and competitive like maps and whitelists and for another podcast. This is like not particular to Asia. I think we wrapped up almost everything from the social issues of Asia. Maybe like Fish, you wanna add anything else?
Not really. I think that everything's been
Well,
said, and everything that needs to be said can be said in another podcast.
okay. Well, I'm just like, what would your message to the players be, like, of Asia? You know, like, what is the biggest thing you need them to do or to understand going forward?
For me, at least, racism is not cool. Some players might be doing it just because like other players are doing it. It just seems cool, but or like maybe you're online, the anonymity of the web like shrouds you from it, but it's not cool and doesn't give a good impression of yourself. Especially like the N word, people are like saying it because like like there are no like African Americans in Asia, such that the bigotry and hate that it carries doesn't target anyone. So they're just like using like slurs that they like found online, like just to seem cool. But like I don't think it does.
Hmm, that's fair. How about you, Fish?
I guess you know, because I know like between the admins and the community is sort of like a love hate relationships, more hate than it is love. But I hope you guys know that like admins are like doing their best for this community. I don't know if they see that, but a lot of the things that we do, we try to make it a point that it's the community's longevity is at stake. And a lot of these things like we consider, we do meetings, we talk about it constantly in our admin chats. We I don't want them to think, or I don't want you guys to think that like we don't care about the community. Because certainly we do. Maybe not me, but hopefully you can see it in Fade, who has been the most, Fade and Spot, who have been the most hands-on active admins, because I work more in the backlines, right? But I hope you guys know that like these guys have been doing their best for the community. And if there's anyone like, if there's anyone that you can trust, it's most likely them, right? Especially now that like they probably have a lot more power, and alongside it a lot more responsibility to work with. So lean on them, probably lean on them, especially, and if you feel like you have any concerns, they'll probably listen to you. That'll be all.
Okay. And then, are there any other topics, questions, anything you guys would like to delve into? Did you want me to explore some of my perspectives a bit more, or do we think we're about ready to close this up?
I think it's like this interview is getting a bit long. Like while there are many topics of good interest, I think like we should just wrap it up here for now.
Alright, yeah, it's fine with me. What do you think, Fish?
I am down for that. I have work tomorrow,
Alright.
sadly.
Down to no longer clip. Alright.
Yeah.
I think I'll go and end the recording in a second. Um, yeah, I mean, I guess on one last note, it's just, like, a lot of the time things seem hopeless, things seem awful, things seem like nothing's going to change, and usually nothing's going to change unless you are the person to start sourcing that change, to start inspiring other people, and to start getting other people to care. It's just kind of the only way to go about these things with these systematic community issues. You kind of just have to stand out and make yourself a potential target, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, I'll go and wrap it up there then. Have a good one.
All right.
Well, I